The snowstorm came without warning. Thick, white sheets of wind clawed across Boston's skyline, swallowing the city in cold silence. Streetlights blurred into golden ghosts. Cars moved like shadows through fog. Inside a black Mercedes, Ethan Cole stared at his reflection in the window. 40 years old. Tailored coat. Wedding ring long gone. Behind his eyes, nothing but frost. He should have been in New York that evening, sealing a multi-million-dollar merger. Instead, he was on the phone, murmuring to his assistant about numbers that no longer meant anything. "Take the shortcut through Cedar Street," he said flatly. The driver hesitated. "Sir, the district's not safe in this weather." Ethan didn't look up. "Neither is wasting my time." The car turned, tires crunching through dirty ice. Cedar Street. He hadn't heard that name in years. The last time he'd been there, he'd been in love. Back then, before the suits, before the empire, there was a girl with paint-stained fingers who taught him how to breathe between deadlines. Leona Hart. And then one night, she was gone. No note, no trace. Just emptiness so deep he mistook it for anger. He told himself she'd used him. His mother, Margaret Cole, made sure of that. "Some women smell weakness the way wolves smell blood," she used to say. He'd believed her. He always did. Now, 9 years later, the road where Leona once laughed was nothing but ruin, boarded windows, shattered glass. The ghost of a mural fading beneath grime. The car slowed at a red light. The wipers groaned. Ethan glanced outside, bored, detached, until his heart stopped. Under a broken street lamp, a woman knelt in the snow. Her hair clung to her face. Soaked and tangled, her hands trembled around a piece of cardboard. Even from inside the car, Ethan could read the words, "Please help, my son is dying." Something inside him cracked. The driver muttered, "Poor soul. Happens every winter." Ethan couldn't answer. The cold in his chest shifted into something heavier. Recognition. It couldn't be. The light turned green. "The Mercedes didn't move, sir?" the driver asked. Ethan's voice came out a whisper. "Wait!" The woman lifted her head as the wind whipped her hair aside, her face pale, hollow, familiar. The world tilted. Leona. He said her name, barely a sound. The driver blinked. "Sir?" Ethan shoved open the door. The blast of winter air hit like glass. He crossed the street without thinking, boots sinking into slush. Cars honked. Someone shouted. He didn't hear. She looked up again, and their eyes met. 9 years collapsed into one frozen heartbeat. Her lips parted. No words came, only a faint gasp before she swayed and fell sideways into the snow. "Leona." Ethan dropped to his knees, catching her just before her head hit the ground. Her body was weightless like fabric soaked in sorrow. "Call an ambulance!" he barked. The driver was already dialing. Leona's eyes fluttered open for a second. Her voice was barely there. "Don't let her find him." "Who?" Ethan demanded, shaking, but her gaze drifted away, unfocused. Snow gathered on her lashes like salt. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. Cutting through the wind, Ethan looked around. Dazed, the cardboard sign lay half-buried beside them, its ink bleeding in the melting snow. "Please help. My son is dying." He stared at the words until they blurred. Then the ambulance lights flashed red across his face, and a single thought echoed in his mind. "You destroyed her, and you called it love." Fade out. Under the sharp cry of sirens, Ethan stood frozen, snow swirling around him like ash. Paramedics pushed past, their voices clipped and urgent, but his world had narrowed to the woman on the stretcher. Her hair, once sunlight in motion, was now a dark tangle against the white. He followed without thinking. The back doors slammed and the ambulance lurched forward. Ethan gripped the metal bar inside, watching Leona's pale hand slip off the blanket. Her fingers twitched once, then stilled. "Her pulse is weak," one medic muttered. "Possible hypothermia, dehydration." Ethan's voice cracked through the noise. "She needs the best care you have." "Are you family?" He hesitated. The word burned in his throat. Yes, he said finally. I'm family. The medic nodded, too focused to care about the lie or the truth. Ethan watched the monitor's thin green line flicker in rhythm with the siren's cry. Every beat sounded like a memory he'd buried. By the time they reached St. Mercy Hospital, the storm had thickened. Flakes the size of coins struck the windshield. He stepped out into chaos. Doctors rushing, gurneys sliding through automatic doors, the smell of antiseptic sharp as glass. Leona disappeared behind swinging doors. Ethan tried to follow, but a nurse blocked him. Sir, please wait here. He could have ordered her aside. Money had always opened every door. But now, standing under the fluorescent light, all that power felt useless. He sank into a plastic chair, hands shaking from something colder than the weather. 9 years. She had vanished 9 years ago. No calls, no notes, no goodbye. He had hated her for it. He had let his mother turn that hate into armor, convincing him love was just weakness dressed as mercy. He rubbed his temple, trying to push back the ache. A TV flickered silently above the waiting room, looping a report about the winter storm. He barely noticed. The nurse returned 20 minutes later, clipboard in hand. Sir, she's stable for now. Severe exhaustion, exposure. She's asking for someone named Ethan. He was on his feet before she finished. Leona lay on a narrow bed, wires tracing fragile lines across her skin. Her eyes opened when he entered, slow and uncertain. Ethan. Her voice was a whisper, rough as broken glass. He moved closer, unsure whether to speak or breathe. Why didn't you tell me you were here? Why are you... He stopped, because the question was too small for the ache in his chest. Leona tried to sit up, but he gently pressed her shoulder down. Don't, he said. You're safe now. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. Safe? You don't understand. You shouldn't have stopped the car. Leona, talk to me. Her eyes darted to the door, panic flickering. She'll find out. She always does. Who? Leona's breath hitched. Your mother. The room tilted. Margaret? What does she have to do with? She said if I ever came near you again, she'd ruin me. Ruin everything. I thought she meant my life. I didn't know she meant his, Ethan frowned. His who? Leona turned her head slowly, tears glinting under the hospital light. Our son. The world went silent. The machines hummed, steady and cruel. Ethan stepped back, heart hammering. No, that can't. He's 8, she whispered. He's sick, and I can't afford the medicine. Outside, thunder rolled over the frozen city, low and distant. Ethan pressed his hands to his face, the truth sinking in like ice through cloth. Leona reached for him, her hand trembling. You have to promise me one thing, she said. Don't let her find him. Ethan looked at her, at the woman he'd once sworn to love until death, and realized he'd already lost her once to his mother's hands. This time, he wouldn't lose them both. He turned toward the hallway, his voice steady for the first time all night. Tell me where he is. Leona closed her eyes, a single tear sliding down. Riverside. Building D, 3rd floor. Apartment 7. Ethan nodded, every part of him burning with purpose. The storm outside roared louder, rattling the windows. He glanced once more at Leona, fragile beneath the pale hospital light, then reached for his coat. Hold on, he said softly. I'm bringing him home. The night pressed down like iron. Ethan left the hospital without a word, the city a blur of white and noise. The snow had thickened, swallowing the streetlights. He drove with one hand clenched around the steering wheel, the other gripping a scrap of paper with the address Leona had given him. Riverside, Building D, 3rd floor, Apartment 7. He replayed her words again and again, each syllable a blade against his chest. Don't let her find him. He didn't need to ask who. The name itself carried a shadow. Margaret Cole, his mother. The woman who turned love into strategy and affection into control. He could still hear her voice from years ago. Ethan, sentiment is the poison of powerful men. She had raised him on ambition and discipline, not tenderness. Every success he achieved, she claimed as her own. Every weakness she punished. Now he realized that the cost of her power had been everything human in him. Wind howled against the car as he turned down the riverside bridge. Frozen water shimmered beneath, black and endless. He pressed harder on the accelerator. Somewhere beyond that darkness was his son, a child he hadn't known existed, fighting for life because of his mother's cruelty. At that very hour, far across the city, Margaret Cole sat inside her marble mansion, a glass of brandy untouched beside her. The firelight trembled across portraits of the Cole lineage, men and women who had built their empire through fear, not love. Her assistant entered quietly. "Madam, we located Mrs. Hart. She was seen near Cedar Street. The police brought her to St. Mercy Hospital." Margaret's eyes lifted slowly. "Alive?" "Yes, ma'am. Barely." She leaned back, lips curving into a faint, cold smile. "And my son? He was there." The silence that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. Margaret turned toward the window where snow fell like ash. He was always predictable. Weakness masquerading as virtue. She stood, the hem of her silk gown brushing the carpet. "Find her again. Find the boy she keeps hidden. If she dares use the Cole name to beg on streets, I'll erase every trace of her." "Understood, ma'am." When the door closed, Margaret stared at the reflection of the fire. For a moment, her hand trembled, but she hid it quickly, pressing her palm against the mantel. A portrait above showed Ethan's father, smiling, kind, and long dead. "You thought love could change people," she murmured to the empty room. "It only weakens them." Outside, the snow thickened into a curtain. Meanwhile, Ethan's car pulled up in front of Riverside Apartments. The building leaned under the weight of time and frost. Paint peeled from the walls. Broken mailboxes hung open like mouths mid-scream. He stepped out, the cold biting into his face. His breath turned to mist. Every hallway smelled of dust and despair. Children's laughter echoed faintly from somewhere distant, fading into coughing. A flickering light buzzed overhead. Ethan's shoes crunched on shattered glass. Apartment 7 was at the end of the corridor, its number half scraped away. He raised his hand to knock but hesitated. The door looked fragile, as if a single wrong touch might splinter it completely. From inside came a faint sound. A child's cough, soft but desperate. Ethan's pulse quickened. He whispered to himself, almost afraid of the truth waiting behind the wood. "My son?" Then he knocked once, twice, the sound swallowed by the storm outside. And somewhere across town, Margaret Cole made her first call to the men who would ensure that neither Leona nor her child would ever see daylight again. The door creaked open only halfway. A pair of small eyes stared up from the shadow. They were gray, sharp, and so familiar that Ethan forgot to breathe. A boy stood there, thin, barefoot, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. The apartment behind him was dim, the air heavy with dampness and medicine. "Who are you?" the boy asked, voice cautious but steady. Ethan knelt, trying not to frighten him. "My name's Ethan. I'm—" "A friend of your mother's." The boy's gaze didn't waver. "Mom's not here. She went to get help." Ethan nodded. "She's safe now. She's at the hospital." The blanket slipped a little. The boy's skin was pale, almost translucent. On the table behind him sat an inhaler, half-empty bottles, and a small stuffed lion with a missing eye. "What's your name?" Ethan asked softly. "Noah," he said. "Mom says it means new beginning." Ethan smiled, though his throat tightened. "That's a good name." Noah studied him. "You talk like her." "When she gets scared, her voice gets small like yours is now." Ethan blinked, unsure whether to laugh or cry. He stepped inside, careful not to let in too much cold air. The apartment was one room, bed, stove, a broken heater ticking uselessly in the corner. "How long have you lived here?" "Since forever," Noah said, shrugging. "Mom says we're just passing through, but we never leave." Ethan felt the words hit him harder than any wind. He looked at the cracked window, the frost crawling along the glass like veins. "Do you have a doctor, Noah?" The boy shook his head. "Just the lady downstairs. She knows herbs. But Mom says real doctors cost too much." Ethan crouched, lowering his voice. "Would you come with me? Just for a little while. Somewhere warm." Noah hesitated, glancing at the door. "Mom said never to go with strangers." "I'm not a stranger," Ethan said, voice trembling. "I'm someone who cares about her. And you." The boy studied his face again, as if searching for a reason to believe him. Then he whispered, "Are you the man in her picture?" Ethan froze. "What picture?" Noah walked to the small table and pulled out a worn photograph, edges curled from years of hiding. It was Ethan, younger, standing beside Leona in front of an old mural. He'd forgotten the photo existed. "She keeps it under her pillow," Noah said. "When she cries, she talks to it." The words shattered something deep inside him. He took the photo with trembling fingers, tracing the image like it might disappear. A sudden noise outside, footsteps echoing through the hallway. Heavy, deliberate. Noah stiffened. "That's not the neighbors." Ethan stood instantly, motioning the boy behind him. The footsteps stopped right outside their door. A shadow moved under the crack, blocking the light. Then came 3 slow knocks. Ethan whispered, "Stay quiet." The voice on the other side was calm, practiced. "Mr. Cole, we've been sent to bring you home." Ethan's blood ran cold. Margaret, she knew. He turned toward the window, but it was bolted shut. The only exit was the back stairwell. He grabbed Noah's hand. "Come with me now." Noah's grip was small but strong. They moved quickly, silent, across the narrow kitchen. Behind them, the doorknob turned once, twice. "Open up, sir," the voice called again. "Mrs. Cole insists." Ethan didn't answer. He pulled the back door open, the hinges shrieking against rust. Icy wind tore through the room. Noah gasped. "Hold on," Ethan said. "We're leaving." They slipped into the stairwell just as the front door burst open. A flashlight swept across the empty apartment. The cardboard photo lay on the floor, half covered in snow. One of the men picked it up, frowning. She said, "Find the woman and the boy." The other man pocketed the photo. "Then we start with him." Outside, Ethan ran through the alley, the boy clinging to his arm. Snow swirled around them, erasing footprints as fast as they appeared. Behind them, the sound of boots on metal echoed down the fire escape. Cold. Methodical, closing in, Ethan pulled Noah close, his breath a white cloud in the darkness. "No matter what happens," he whispered, "I won't let her touch you." Somewhere above the rooftops, a church bell tolled midnight. The storm swallowed the city whole, and in the mansion across town, Margaret Cole poured another glass of brandy. Smiling faintly as thunder rolled, she whispered to the empty air, "Let the hunt begin." Snow lashed against the alley walls, turning every breath into a cloud of ice. Ethan held Noah's hand tighter as they ran, boots slipping on frozen pavement. The city had gone mute under the storm. Only the wail of distant sirens and the echo of their footsteps broke the silence. "Faster," Ethan whispered. The boy stumbled, gasping, but didn't complain. Behind them, a flashlight beam cut through the blizzard. Voices followed, hard and certain. "They went this way!" Ethan turned left into a narrow service lane. Trash cans toppled. Snow sprayed against brick. His lungs burned, but he didn't slow down. Every instinct screamed that stopping meant losing the boy and himself forever. "Are they from Grandma?" Noah asked between breaths. Ethan almost tripped. "What did you say?" "Mom said Grandma doesn't like us." He swallowed the answer that wanted to rise. "She's not going to hurt you," he said instead. "Not while I'm here." They reached the end of the lane. A chain-link fence loomed ahead, half buried in ice. Beyond it, the glow of an old train yard flickered through the storm. Ethan lifted Noah over first, his muscles straining. Then he climbed, the metal biting into his palms. A shout erupted behind them. A flashlight beam found their shadows on the fence. "Stop right there." Ethan dropped to the other side, grabbed Noah, and ran again. The wind tore at their coats. Train tracks stretched ahead, silver lines swallowed by snow. "Where are we going?" Noah cried. "Somewhere warm." He had no plan, only motion. A freight train rumbled to life nearby, its horn cutting through the storm. Ethan sprinted toward it. The air reeked of steel and diesel. He found an open car filled with crates, threw Noah inside, and climbed after him just as the train began to move. They crouched behind the boxes, hearts pounding. The sound of boots faded into distance. Only the rattle of wheels remained. Ethan pulled the boy close, both shivering. "You're safe for now," he said, voice low. Noah looked up at him, eyes wide and uncertain. "Are you really my dad?" Ethan hesitated. He had imagined this question for years in every version of regret, but not like this, not in a frozen boxcar running from his own bloodline. "Yes," he said finally. "I didn't know, but I am now." Noah nodded slowly, then leaned against him. "Mom said you'd come someday." The words almost broke him. Ethan tightened his arms around the child, staring out the crack in the metal wall where snow streamed like ash. The city lights faded behind them. In the distance, a black SUV stopped by the fence they'd climbed. Two men stepped out, scanning the tracks. One of them held a phone to his ear. "Ma'am, we lost them. They boarded a freight heading north." Margaret's voice came through, crisp as static. "Follow it. And remember, no witnesses." The man pocketed the phone and nodded to his partner. "She means it." Above the storm, the train roared on, cutting through the night like a heartbeat. Inside the car, Noah whispered, "Where will we go now?" Ethan looked down at him. The boy's eyes were already closing from exhaustion. "Someplace no one can find us," he said. But even as he spoke, he knew Margaret wouldn't stop. She never had. He pressed his hand against the boy's back, feeling the shallow rhythm of each breath. For the first time in years, Ethan wasn't running toward power or away from pain. He was running for something fragile, something worth losing everything else to protect. The train thundered into darkness, the snow still falling, erasing every trace of where they'd been. Under the sterile hum of hospital lights, Leona woke to the hollow sound of her own name echoing from a nurse's voice. Her neck ached. She'd fallen asleep in the chair again, beside an empty bed. For a moment, she thought Daniel had been moved for treatment. But then her heart cracked open with a single glance. The blanket was rumpled, the pillow still warm, but the bed was empty. His sketchbook lay on the table, open to a half-finished drawing. 3 figures holding hands, their faces left blank. "Miss Ward?" The nurse stepped into the room, confusion spreading across her face. "Where's the boy?" Leona's voice broke before she could shape the words. "He's gone!" She stumbled to her feet, checking every corner as if her son might be hiding beneath the sheets. Panic surged through her chest, quick and electric. "Where is he? Did someone move him? Did Ethan?" The name left her lips like a wound reopening. The nurse reached for the intercom. "Security to room 12. Possible missing patient." "No," Leona said sharply, grabbing the woman's wrist. "Please give me 5 minutes before you call anyone." The nurse hesitated. Something in Leona's eyes, raw, determined, made her lower the receiver. 5 minutes. Leona tore through the hallway barefoot, the cold linoleum biting her skin. At the reception desk, she demanded the surveillance feed. The guard, startled by her tone, turned the monitor toward her. The screen flickered. 12:43 a.m. Ethan, his coat dusted with snow, leading Daniel through the side exit. The boy's head rested against his shoulder. They disappeared into the storm. Leona covered her mouth to keep from screaming. He took him. Her mind spun between betrayal and desperate hope. Maybe he was protecting Daniel. Maybe he'd lost control. Either way, she couldn't just wait. She turned and ran. Outside, the storm had thickened to white blindness. Snow howled across the parking lot, swallowing the city's edges. She wrapped her thin coat tighter, squinting against the wind. Taxi lights glowed faintly through the blur. "Downtown rail yard," she said, climbing in. The driver glanced back. "Ma'am, that's shut down in weather like this." "Then drive until it isn't," she snapped. The car lurched forward. Ice hammered the windshield. As they crawled through the empty streets, fragments of her life with Ethan flashed like broken glass. His laugh, his vows, the night he'd walked away. She'd believed she was doing the right thing by leaving. But watching that grainy footage, she saw a different truth. He hadn't stopped loving her, just learned how to bury it. The taxi skidded near the bridge. A police cruiser's lights flashed ahead, blocking the road. Leona leaned out the window. "What's happening?" "Freight accident!" the officer shouted through the wind. "Somebody jumped on a moving train an hour ago. Security's searching the line." Her heart dropped. "Which way was it heading?" "North," the officer replied. "Toward New Hampshire." Leona's voice turned to breath. "Ethan," she pulled back into the cab. "Take me to the coal estate," she said. The driver looked uncertain. The one on Beacon Hill? Yes, Margaret Cole, he whistled softly. That's high society. Leona stared out into the storm. Not tonight. When the car stopped before the wrought iron gates, Leona stepped out into knee-deep snow. The mansion loomed above her, its windows dark except for a faint orange glow in the east wing. She pushed through the wind until she reached the heavy front doors. Her knuckles hit the wood once, twice. No answer. On the third knock, the door opened a fraction. The butler's pale face appeared. "Miss Ward," he whispered, startled. "Mrs. Cole isn't receiving visitors. She'll receive me," Leona said, pushing past him. The marble floor was slick under melting snow. Her breath came in ragged clouds. From the sitting room, a voice floated out, calm and precise. "I wondered how long it would take you to find your way back." Margaret Cole sat by the fire, a glass of brandy in her hand, her eyes gleaming like polished stone. "You sent them after him," Leona said, her voice trembling with fury. Margaret smiled faintly. "After my son, of course. He's making poor decisions again. Bringing you back into our lives was his first mistake." Leona stepped closer, fists shaking. "He took our child." "Your child?" Margaret's tone sharpened like frost. "He's a Cole, and he will be raised as one, with or without you." The storm battered the windows, wind howling like a warning. Leona's whisper cut through the room. "Then you've just declared war." Margaret raised her glass, unflinching. "I never lose, dear." The clock struck 1. The brandy shimmered in the firelight. Outside, the snow kept falling, erasing every trace of where Ethan and Noah had gone. Inside, 2 women stood facing each other, one forged by power, one by love, and neither ready to surrender. Snow still clung to the freight car when dawn arrived. The light a thin blade cutting through the gray. Ethan woke to the groan of metal and the sting of frost on his face. Beside him, Noah was curled against a crate, sleeping, his small hand gripping Ethan's coat like an anchor. For a moment, everything was still. The world outside was white and endless, the sound of the wheels softer now as the train slowed near a rural crossing. Ethan brushed the frost from the window slit. The town beyond looked forgotten, rows of shuttered stores, chimneys smoking faintly through the cold. He touched the boy's shoulder. "Noah," he whispered. "Time to move." The child stirred, blinking awake. "Are we there yet?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Not yet, but we're closer." He helped Noah down from the freight car, landing in snow that reached their knees. The wind bit hard, but the air smelled clean, untouched by the city's decay. Ethan pulled his scarf higher and led the boy toward the town's edge, where a weathered diner sign flickered in the pale morning light. Inside, heat and the smell of coffee wrapped around them. The waitress looked up, gray hair, sharp eyes that had seen everything. "You two look half frozen," she said. "Just passing through," Ethan murmured, guiding Noah to a booth. The woman poured coffee and set down a plate of toast without asking. "Storm's supposed to get worse tonight," she said. "Roads will be shut by evening." Ethan nodded. "Is there a place to stay nearby? Somewhere quiet?" She studied him for a long moment before replying. "Old cabin near Miller's Pond, belonged to a fisherman. Nobody goes there in winter." She scribbled directions on a napkin. "You didn't hear it from me." Ethan slid a few bills onto the counter, more than enough. "Thank you." When they stepped outside again, the light was already fading, snow thickening into a curtain. Noah clutched his hand tighter. "Are they coming after us?" Ethan looked at him, the boy's breath fogging the air between them. "They might try," he said, "but we'll be ready." Miles away, in Boston, Margaret Cole stood at her study window watching the same storm swallow the skyline. A fire burned behind her, but she didn't feel its warmth. Leona's visit still echoed in her mind, her fury, her defiance. Margaret had expected tears, not war. But it didn't matter. Every war had a victor, and she had never lost one. "Ma'am," her assistant said from the doorway. "The team traced Mr. Cole's signal north. Freight line toward New Hampshire. We can intercept if we move now." Margaret turned slowly, her eyes like cold glass. "Do it quietly," she said. "No police. No attention. And the woman? Margaret's lips curved slightly. Keep her under watch. I want her alive long enough to see what love costs. When the man left, she poured herself another glass of wine. The firelight caught the gold ring on her hand, the same one Ethan's father had given her before he died. In its reflection, she saw a ghost of the man who had once told her that power meant nothing without compassion. She had buried that lesson long ago. By dusk, the storm had become a white wall. Ethan carried Noah through knee-deep drifts until the outline of a cabin emerged from the trees. Its roof sagged under snow, but smoke from an old chimney meant the stove still worked. He pushed the door open. The hinges groaned, dust rising like memory. Inside, he built a small fire, wrapping Noah in a blanket. The boy leaned against him, eyes heavy with exhaustion. Will Mom find us? Ethan stared into the flames. I hope she does, he whispered. Before they do. Outside, through the storm, headlights flickered far down the frozen road. The hunters had already begun to close in. The road north vanished beneath the snow. Leona's car struggled through the drifts, the windshield wipers thudding like a heartbeat that refused to stop. The storm had swallowed the world. Every few miles, she'd see the blurred glow of a farmhouse window, then nothing but white again. The heater had died hours ago. Her hands trembled on the wheel, but her eyes never left the road. She kept replaying Margaret's words in her head, each one colder than the last. He's a coal, and he will be raised as one. Leona gripped the wheel tighter. Her knuckles turned white. Over my dead body, she whispered. At the next turn, the tires lost grip. The car spun once, twice, and slid sideways into a snowbank. The engine stalled. Silence pressed in. Leona slammed the steering wheel. No, no, no! Outside, the storm screamed. She pulled her coat close and stepped into the wind. Her phone had no signal. No lights, no sound, only the endless gray of the northern highway. She looked down the road, knowing Ethan would keep moving. He would find somewhere hidden, somewhere quiet. She began to walk. Snow crunched under her boots, each step a fight against the cold. The horizon was nothing but mist, but she followed instinct and love through the blizzard. Miles away, inside the old cabin, Ethan fed more wood into the stove. The fire hissed and cracked. Noah slept beside him under a pile of blankets, cheeks flushed with warmth. For the first time since leaving Boston, the boy looked peaceful. Ethan leaned back against the wall. The room was dim, shadows dancing on the wood. He'd sealed the windows with old rags, killed the light that might betray them. Outside, the storm howled against the roof. He reached for the locket Noah wore around his neck. It was tarnished, the clasp bent. Inside, a small photo, Leona holding a baby in sunlight. The image hit him like a knife, 8 years of silence captured in a square of paper. He whispered into the fire, I'll make it right. At the same moment, headlights flared through the forest, brief, distant, then gone. The storm swallowed them, but not before the glint of metal caught the snow. 2 black SUVs rolled slowly along the unmarked road. Inside, men in dark coats scanned the trees. The driver spoke into his radio. We've got tracks leading off the highway. Small prints. 1 adult, 1 child. Confirm and report, came the voice on the line. Clipped, female, certain. Margaret sat in her car miles behind them, her expression unreadable as the signal crackled. Alive, she said. Bring them back alive. For a moment, she glanced at the photograph on her dashboard, Ethan at 10 years old, smiling, holding a fishing rod beside his father. A memory she hadn't earned. She turned the photo face down. Back at the cabin, Ethan froze. Somewhere outside, snow shifted. Not wind, not nature. He rose silently, checking the window. Footprints. He crossed the room, lifted the small revolver he'd taken from the glove compartment of a rusted car near the tracks. His hand trembled. Noah stirred. Dad! Ethan pressed a finger to his lips. Shh. Stay here. He moved to the door, peering through the crack. The world was white and empty, until a dark shape passed between the trees. A voice called out, calm and cold. "Mr. Cole, you've made this much harder than it needed to be." Ethan's pulse spiked. He backed toward Noah. "Listen to me, buddy. If I tell you to run, you run toward the trees. Don't look back." Noah's lip quivered. "Are they bad men?" "They work for someone who thinks love is weakness," Ethan said. "We're about to prove her wrong." A gun clicked outside. Boots crunched closer. Ethan pulled Noah behind the wood stove. The door creaked. The first man stepped inside, wiping snow from his gloves. "Orders are to bring you in, not bury you." Ethan's voice was steady, even as fear clawed at him. "Then let's both hope you're good at following orders." The firelight flickered against the walls, and for an instant, the snowstorm outside went silent, the calm before something irreversible. Then came the sound of breaking glass. Glass shattered inward, spraying the cabin with shards and snow. Ethan threw himself over Noah, the boy's small cry muffled against his chest. The wind roared through the broken window, and with it came the cold shadow of the man aiming a pistol through the frame. Ethan rolled sideways, grabbing the old revolver. The shot missed him by inches and buried itself in the log wall. He fired back once, wild, unsteady, and the intruder ducked away. "Dad!" Noah's voice was trembling. "I'm here," Ethan whispered. "Stay down." Boots pounded against the porch. Another figure kicked the door open. Snow and light flooded the room. Ethan dove behind the overturned table, heart slamming against his ribs. The revolver was nearly empty. 2 bullets left, maybe 1 if the cylinder jammed. The first man stepped through the doorway, scanning the shadows. "Come out, Mr. Cole. No one has to die tonight." Ethan rose halfway, fired once. The man fell back into the snow, shouting in pain. The other raised his gun and squeezed off 3 rounds. Wood splintered inches from Ethan's head. "Stop shooting!" The first man groaned. "We need him alive!" Silence followed. Then the sound of a child sobbing softly. Ethan turned. Noah was crouched near the stove, clutching the edge of his blanket. The fear in his eyes tore through him deeper than the cold ever could. Outside, an engine started. He heard someone speaking on a radio. "We've got contact. Cabin off Miller's Pond. Send the second team." Ethan grabbed Noah's coat. "We're leaving." "But the men—" "Now!" He pushed open the back door, dragging Noah into the blizzard. The wind knifed through their clothes, erasing tracks as fast as they made them. Behind them, the cabin glowed orange, a spark from the overturned stove catching on the curtains. Within seconds, fire licked the windows. They ran, through the trees, over the frozen creek, up the hill where the snow turned blue under moonlight. Ethan's lungs burned, his legs heavy. But when he looked back and saw the flames devouring the cabin, he didn't stop. The heat faded. The storm swallowed the world again. At the ridge, he spotted the faint outline of a ranger tower. Old, abandoned, maybe shelter. He lifted Noah and climbed the creaking steps, every board screaming under their weight. Inside, the room was empty except for a broken chair and a rusted lantern. He set Noah down and pulled him close. "You did good, buddy. Are they gone?" Noah asked. "For now." Below them, faint headlights moved through the forest. Ethan's hands shook as he reloaded the revolver with the last 2 bullets. His breath fogged the air. "They won't stop," he muttered. Noah leaned against him, eyes half closed. "Why do they want us?" Ethan looked out over the frozen world, white, silent, endless. "Because some people can't stand losing control," he said softly. "Even if it means destroying what they love." Far below, one of the SUVs stopped near the burning cabin. Men climbed out, their voices swallowed by wind. One of them lifted his radio. "Target fled north. Orders?" Margaret's voice came through again, calm as ice. "Continue." "He'll head for the border. End this before he crosses." The man hesitated. "The child?" A pause. Then, "Bring him home." The radio clicked off. Ethan held Noah tighter, feeling the boy's heartbeat against his own. For a moment, the fear turned to something sharper. Purpose, he whispered to himself, almost like a prayer. "You'll never touch him again." "Mother!" The storm outside shifted, wind screaming through the tower beams. Somewhere below, a branch cracked under weight, too heavy for snow alone. Ethan rose, gun in hand, eyes fixed on the stairs. The hunt hadn't ended. It had only changed direction. The first step on the ladder groaned. Then another. Ethan's breath stopped mid-chest. He signaled Noah to stay behind the old chair and crouched low beside the window, revolver raised. Through the slats of the floor, he saw a moving shadow, broad shoulders, heavy boots. Whoever was climbing was alone or foolish enough to come first. When the head appeared in the trap door, Ethan struck. He swung the lantern down hard. Glass burst, oil splattered, and the man cursed as fire flared for an instant before dying in the snow that coated the steps. Ethan pressed the barrel of the gun to the man's temple. "Tell me who sent you." The man spat blood. "You already know, Margaret. She doesn't want you dead," the man said, panting. "She wants the boy." "That's it." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then tell her she'll have to crawl through hell first." He hit the man once, hard enough to drop him back down the ladder. The body rolled into the drift below, motionless. Ethan waited, listening. No shouts, no echo of engines. For now, the others hadn't seen. He closed the trap door and turned to Noah. The boy was shaking but silent, his eyes wide and clear. "You heard him?" "No," Ethan said. "I stopped him." Noah nodded as if trying to believe it. "Mom would have helped him." Ethan looked away. "Your mom's better than I am." Hours passed. The wind eased, the storm thinning into soft flakes. In the weak dawn light, the forest looked peaceful again. Clean, empty, almost kind. Ethan wrapped Noah in his coat and watched the horizon burn faintly pink. He thought about Leona, the way she used to hum when she cooked, the way she'd said his name the last night before everything fell apart. He had promised himself he'd never beg forgiveness, yet now every mile north felt like a confession. Down below, the sound of a car engine shattered the silence. A single vehicle, slow, cautious. Ethan crouched to the window. The car wasn't black. It was a dark blue sedan, older, the kind you drive when you're running out of options. Then he saw her. Leona stepped out into the snow, coat whipping around her. Her face was pale, drawn, but her eyes were alive. She looked up at the tower, spotting the movement in the window. "Ethan!" He froze. For a second, he thought he was imagining her voice. Then he was running down the ladder, boots thudding against the wood. When he reached her, they just stared. The years, the lies, the miles between them, all of it condensed into that single breath of cold air. "You found us," he said. "I followed the fire," she answered. Her voice broke. "Where's Noah?" Ethan turned. "He's safe," she exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and fury. "You could have gotten him killed." "I got him out. You should have trusted me." He stepped closer. "And what would you have done, Leona? Asked your mother-in-law for mercy?" The name hit like a blow. "She's hunting you," Leona whispered. "She'll kill you if she has to. Then we keep running." "No," her voice steadied. "We fight!" Ethan stared at her, the words almost foreign coming from her mouth. But something in her face, steel under exhaustion, made him believe her. They climbed back into the tower together. Noah woke, eyes lighting up when he saw her. "Mom!" He threw himself into her arms, and for the first time since the storm began, the world felt human again. Outside, far down the road, a radio crackled in one of the SUVs that still searched the northern woods. A voice reported, "Tracks lead to the Ranger Tower. Moving in." Margaret's answer was soft, almost tender. "Good. Let's bring my family home." In the tower above, unaware of the signal closing in, Ethan watched mother and son reunited. He whispered to himself, "This ends tonight." The snow began to fall harder again, erasing the trail that led to them, even as engines roared through the forest below. Wind tore through the trees, a low, ceaseless growl that swallowed every other sound. The tower shuddered under its weight. Leona held Noah close, her body shielding him from the cold, but her eyes never left the horizon. She could feel it, the inevitability of Margaret's approach, the storm tightening like a noose. Ethan checked the revolver again, even though he knew it wouldn't matter against an army of men. 2 bullets. That was all. He shoved it back into his coat pocket. "We can't stay," Leona said. He nodded. "She'll find us before sunrise." "Then we move now," she said. "Before the road's gone." Noah looked between them. Are we running again? Leona brushed the boy's hair back. We're finding somewhere better to stand. They descended the ladder into knee-deep snow. The sky was a steel sheet bruised with light. Ethan led them through the forest, careful to leave no straight path, doubling back across the creek where the current had frozen mid-motion. The cold gnawed through his boots, but he didn't stop. Behind them, engines cut through the silence. The first black SUV broke through the tree line, headlights sweeping across the white. Go! Ethan hissed. They ran. Branches whipped their faces, snow stung their eyes. The sound of tires on ice grew louder, closer. Ethan grabbed Leona's hand, dragging her behind a fallen pine. The three of them crouched in the shadows, breath steaming in the air. Two men stepped out of the SUV, rifles slung over their shoulders. Their voices carried through the trees. She said they're close. Look for footprints, small ones. Noah clung tighter to Leona's coat. She pressed a hand over his mouth. Ethan crept forward, snow muffling each step. He picked up a rock, threw it deep into the woods. The noise snapped the men's heads around. There! They moved toward the sound, boots crunching, rifles raised. Ethan motioned to Leona, now. They slipped behind the tree line, running in the opposite direction. When they reached the clearing, Ethan stopped short. The river that had been a trickle earlier was now a sheet of moving ice, half frozen, roaring under the storm's melt. Leona stared. We can't cross that. He looked back, the flash of headlights cutting through the snow. We don't have a choice. He pulled Noah into his arms. Hold tight. Leona hesitated only a second, then took his free hand. They stepped onto the ice. It groaned beneath their weight, each crack a warning. Halfway across, a shot rang out. The bullet skipped off the frozen surface inches from Ethan's feet. Keep moving! He shouted, the ice cracked louder. Leona screamed as her foot broke through. Ethan lunged, grabbing her wrist, pulling her back up. Water surged over the ice, freezing as it touched air. They reached the far bank just as the ice gave way behind them, swallowing the sound of gunfire. Ethan collapsed on the snow, chest heaving. Noah's lips were blue, but he was breathing. Leona knelt beside them, sobbing from relief and cold. In the distance, the men shouted into their radios. The river had cut them off, at least for now. Ethan looked at the boy in his arms. You okay, buddy? Noah nodded weakly. You didn't let go. Never will, Ethan said. Leona looked across the river where the men's flashlights flickered like restless ghosts. She won't stop, she whispered. Margaret will burn the world before she loses. Ethan's jaw hardened. Then we make her see what she's lost. He stood, lifting Noah again. There's a town ahead, he said. We find shelter. We find help. As they disappeared into the storm, the wind carried the faint hum of engines turning back toward the highway. Margaret's voice echoed through a radio still clutched in one of the men's hands. Don't follow the river, she ordered. They'll head for the town. Wait for them there. The man looked up at the frozen water at the empty bank beyond. Yes, ma'am. The line went dead, and above the storm, hidden by snow and distance, a church bell began to ring, slow, deliberate, marking the hours until dawn. The bell tolled again, distant, hollow, as if the storm itself were counting down. Ethan trudged up the hill with Noah in his arms, Leona beside him. Their clothes were soaked, stiff with ice. Ahead, faint through the white, stood a wooden cross on a steeple. The church was small, stone darkened by age, its windows glowing with a single orange light. Inside, the air was still and warm. Candles burned on the altar. An old priest looked up from a pew when the door opened, snow sweeping in around them. God above, he murmured. Come in quickly. He hurried to the stove, throwing another log onto the fire. You'll freeze out there. Ethan nodded his thanks, lowering Noah to a bench near the heat. The boy coughed, a rough sound tearing from his chest. Leona knelt beside him. It's all right, baby. We're safe. The priest fetched blankets and tea, his movements careful but quick. Roads are closed, he said. No one's coming through tonight. You're welcome to stay until morning. Ethan's shoulders eased just slightly. Thank you, Father. The man smiled faintly. Name's Bennett. No one's called me Father in years. Noah's eyes lifted to him. Do you have angels here? Bennett chuckled softly. Only the tired kind. He looked at Ethan, as if he saw something beyond the dirt and exhaustion. "You've been running a long time." Ethan didn't answer. Outside, the storm pressed against the stained glass, making the colors shiver. Leona sipped the tea, watching her son's chest rise and fall. "He needs a doctor soon," she whispered. Bennett nodded. "There's a clinic 2 towns over if the road's clear by morning." Ethan stood and walked to the window. Beyond the snow, faint headlights moved at the edge of town. His gut twisted. "They're already here." The priest followed his gaze. "Who are they?" "People who think they own us," Ethan said. Bennett hesitated only a second, then walked to the back of the church. "There's a tunnel beneath the vestry," he said quietly. "Old Prohibition route. Comes out near the cemetery woods. If you go now, you might get ahead of them." Leona looked up sharply. "You'd help us?" Bennett met her eyes. "I've seen what power does to love. Go." They gathered their things. Noah clutched his stuffed lion, holding it tight against his chest. The priest opened the trapdoor beneath the pulpit. Cold air spilled out, smelling of stone and dust. Ethan turned to him. "If they come, I'll tell them you never arrived," Bennett said. "And I'll pray that's true." Ethan hesitated, then gripped the old man's hand. "You already saved us." The 3 of them descended into darkness. The tunnel was narrow, the walls slick with age. Leona carried a candle, its flame trembling with every breath. Above them, muffled voices echoed, doors opening, boots on tile. Margaret's men had found the church. "Search every room," one ordered. "The kid's sick. They can't have gone far." In the tunnel, Leona tightened her grip on Ethan's arm. "She's here." Ethan shook his head. "No, she sends others to do her braking." They moved faster, the light ahead flickering like a heartbeat. The tunnel ended behind the churchyard, where rows of crosses jutted through the snow. They emerged into the freezing night, half crawling, half running through the graves. Noah coughed again, the sound sharp in the silence. Ethan lifted him, carrying him through the drifts. Behind them, the church bell rang once more. Then a gunshot cracked the air. They turned. Smoke curled from one of the windows. The fire spread quickly, orange against white. The church's roof glowed like a dying ember. Leona covered Noah's eyes. "Don't look," Ethan stared at the flames. "She burned it," he whispered. "She's burning everything," Leona said. For a moment, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of smoke and ash across the snow. The fire's reflection danced in their eyes. Then Ethan turned north again, holding Noah close. "We keep moving," he said, "until she can't follow." Leona took his hand. "And then?" "Then," Ethan said quietly, "we make her answer for all of it." The snow swallowed their footprints behind them, as if the world itself wanted their path erased. Ahead, the horizon waited, gray, endless and cruel. Somewhere beyond it, Margaret Cole listened to the static of a radio, a smile ghosting her lips as she heard the single report. "They escaped." "Good," she said softly. "Let them run." "Everyone runs before they fall." The storm broke at dawn. The sky turned the color of ash, and the wind slowed to a whisper. Ethan, Leona, and Noah reached the edge of a small, forgotten town. Just a strip of shuttered shops, a gas station, and a diner with a faded neon sign that blinked open, though no cars passed. They stopped behind the station, hidden from the road. Ethan checked the boy's pulse, the small heartbeat faint but steady. Leona tore her scarf in half and wrapped it around Noah's neck. "He's burning up," she said. "He needs medicine, Ethan, real medicine." Ethan scanned the horizon. "There'll be a pharmacy. But if Margaret's men are already here, she'll expect us to hide," Leona said. "So we don't." Her tone was calm, clear. It startled him. For 9 years, he had remembered her as gentle, uncertain. The woman beside him now looked forged from iron and ice. "We get him help," she said. "Then we finish this." Ethan hesitated, but Noah coughed again, and that was enough. He left them behind the gas station and headed toward town. Hood pulled low, every step deliberate. The streets were half buried in snow. A bell above the diner door jangled when he stepped inside. The waitress behind the counter glanced up. recognition flickering. His face still carried the memory of wealth and scandal. "You look like someone who's not supposed to be here," she said. "Just need directions." Ethan replied. She nodded toward the square. "Pharmacy's closed. Owner lives behind it. Tell him Jenny sent you." Ethan thanked her and turned to leave. Through the window, he caught movement. A black SUV parked across the street. Two men in heavy coats stood beside it, scanning the block. His heart kicked once, hard. He pushed back through the door, forcing himself not to run. The men's voices carried faintly through the snow. "She said they're on foot. Woman, man, kid. Check every building." Ethan ducked down an alley, circling behind the pharmacy. The back door was locked, but the key still hung under the mat, a small-town habit. Inside, shelves were stacked with dust and silence. He searched until he found what he needed: antibiotics, fever medicine, a box of syringes. He stuffed them into his coat and slipped out the back. A voice cut through the air. "Mr. Cole!" He froze. One of the men stood at the alley's end, gun drawn. "Mrs. Cole asked us to bring you home." Ethan's voice was low. "Home burned down a long time ago." The man lifted the gun higher. "Don't make this difficult." Before he could answer, another voice rang out behind them, sharp, furious. "Put it down." Leona stood at the corner, her own weapon leveled, hand steady. Snowflakes clung to her hair. The man turned. "You shouldn't be here, ma'am. I spent 9 years being where she told me not to be," Leona said. "That ends now." The air cracked. One shot. The man's gun clattered into the snow. Ethan grabbed Leona's arm, pulling her away before the echo faded. They ran through the alley, across the street, back toward the station. Noah was waiting by the fence, shivering but alive. Leona dropped to her knees beside him, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "Medicine?" she asked. Ethan handed her the bottle. "We got it." From the hill above town, another SUV rolled into view. "They found us again," Leona said. Ethan looked at her, breathing hard. "Then we stopped running." She followed his gaze toward the radio tower on the far ridge, its red light blinking through the fog. "If we can get a signal out," she said, "we can make the world see her for what she is." Ethan nodded. "Let's make her chase the truth for once." He lifted Noah into his arms. The three of them moved toward the ridge, their figures swallowed by snow. Behind them, the men from the SUVs gathered near the burning alley. Speaking into their radios, "She won't like this," one said. The other shrugged. "She doesn't like anything she can't own." And miles away, in her glass-walled office above the city, Margaret Cole listened to the report. Her reflection in the window looked younger in the dawn light, almost human. "Then break them," she whispered. "Before they learn, they can't be." The Cole mansion stood frozen in the night wind, a stone beast trapped beneath silver light. The glass walls reflected a colorless moon, cold, immaculate, merciless. Ethan stopped his car at the end of the gravel path and killed the engine. The sudden silence pressed against his chest until he could hear his own heartbeat. The iron gates opened by themselves, slow and deliberate, as if recognizing the prodigal son it once imprisoned. He stepped through the marble pillars, past the snow-drowned fountain, into the shadow of the house that had shaped him and scarred him. Everything was still perfect, too perfect. The kind of perfection that suffocates. She was waiting by the fireplace, though no fire burned. Only the amber glow of the chandelier touched her porcelain face. Margaret Cole, the woman who ruled a city with one raised brow. Ethan. Her voice sliced through the quiet like a needle wrapped in silk. "I thought you died out there." "Not yet," he said, his boots leaving a trail of melting snow across the polished floor. Margaret studied him. Wet coat, hollow eyes, defiance carved into his jaw. "You always were your father's son, reckless, sentimental, so easy to ruin by love. I saved you from yourself, and this is how you thank me?" Ethan reached into his bag and dropped a small black hard drive onto the glass table. It clattered like a gunshot. "Everything's in there. The money transfers, the recordings, the threats. You didn't just destroy a family. You bribed doctors, erased names, buried people alive under your reputation." Margaret tilted her head slightly. "You think a few files can hurt me?" No, Ethan said quietly. But the truth can. Something flickered in her eyes, the faintest tremor behind control. You don't understand. Everything I did was to keep you alive. You were born into blood, Ethan. If I hadn't cut out the weak, they would have cut us down. He stepped closer. No, Mother. You cut out anything you couldn't control. For a moment, neither spoke. Then the fireplace roared to life, automatic, programmed, a cruel illusion of warmth. The light painted her face crimson, her pupils two black flames. I made you, she hissed, each word ringing with steel. Without me, you are nothing. Ethan met her gaze, steady, unflinching. Maybe. But if that's true, then tonight you'll see what your creation can do. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Her guards, still loyal, still blind. Ethan didn't look away. I came to end this, he said. Margaret's expression cracked, fury, pride, and something like fear bleeding together. You won't win. No one defies their own blood and lives. Ethan's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Then you'll finally see what blood does best. It finds its way home. He took one step forward. Behind him, the glass doors burst open, a wave of snow and wind crashing through the room. The drapes snapped like torn sails, and the two of them stood facing each other. Mother and son. Creation and rebellion, framed by the storm they had both made. The confrontation had only just begun. The storm howled through the broken glass, flinging snow across the marble floor. Ethan didn't flinch. He stood still while the guards stormed in, dark shapes against the white chaos. Stop, Margaret commanded. Her voice, though thin, still carried authority. The men froze, uncertain. She raised a trembling hand toward Ethan. Leave us. When the room emptied, silence returned, thick, suffocating, charged with old ghosts. Margaret moved closer, her heels scraping against the ice. You think you're saving them, don't you? She whispered. The woman, the boy. You think you're a hero? I'm not a hero, Ethan said. I'm what's left after the heroes die. Her lips tightened. You have no idea what I sacrificed for you. The people I destroyed to keep your name pure. Every dirty hand I cut off before it could touch you. You cut off everyone who could love me, Ethan said quietly. That's not protection. That's loneliness. Margaret's face twitched. For a heartbeat, something broke behind her eyes. Not guilt, but grief. I built an empire, she said, so you would never kneel. I gave you the world, Ethan. You built a cage, he said. And called it the world. She opened her mouth, but he interrupted, dropping his voice until it trembled. The files are already gone. Every account, every bribe. The press has it by now. By morning, Coal Industries will burn. Margaret's breath caught. Her knuckles whitened on the edge of the table. You wouldn't. I did. The chandelier flickered. Outside, thunder rolled over the city like a slow drum. Margaret's hands began to shake. You ruined everything, she whispered. Your father's name, my legacy, everything I bled for. No, Ethan said. You did that the moment you decided blood was more valuable than love. Margaret turned away, staring at the dark window. Her reflection trembled in the glass, a pale ghost framed by lightning. Do you think they'll thank you? She said softly. That woman. She'll leave when the money's gone. The boy will hate you when he learns who you are. Ethan's voice broke, low but steady. Maybe, but at least he'll know the truth. The wind shrieked. A portrait fell from the wall, crashing beside them. Margaret flinched. Her composure cracked completely. She pressed a hand to her chest, gasping. Ethan hesitated. He should walk away. Let her drown in her empire's ashes. But then he saw her. Not the matriarch, not the monster, just a frail woman shaking in the cold, terrified of dying alone. He grabbed the phone on the table and called emergency services. Coal residents, he said. Cardiac arrest. Send an ambulance. Margaret sank into a chair, clutching her heart. Why? She rasped. After everything I did, why help me? Ethan looked down at her. Snow swirled through the broken doors, landing in her silver hair. Because you're still my mother, he said softly. And I'm not you. She stared up at him. Disbelief, regret, something nameless flickering behind her eyes. The sirens echoed faintly in the distance, weaving through the storm. Ethan turned toward the shattered window, watching the red lights approach. The wind cooled the sweat on his forehead. He felt empty but clean, like a man stepping out of a burning house. Behind him, Margaret whispered his name, not a command this time, not even a plea. Just a sound, fragile and human. He didn't turn back. Morning broke gray and soundless over Boston. The storm had passed, leaving the streets slick with melting ice. Headlights moved slowly through puddles that mirrored the pale sky. The city looked washed, bruised, exhausted, waiting for something to end. Ethan stood by the window of a cheap motel room on the south side, staring at the muted television. His face looked older in the reflection, a man carved from sleepless nights. Across every channel, the same story played, Coal Empire under federal investigation. Photos of Margaret flashed across the screen, once regal, now reduced to a still image of a stretcher under white hospital lights. Sources confirm Coal matriarch suffered cardiac arrest following accusations of corruption and fraud. The reporters' voices were sharp, almost gleeful. They spoke of embezzlement, bribery, medical cover-ups, a dynasty collapsing in real time. Ethan muted the TV. The silence that followed felt heavier than the noise. He'd done it. The empire that had strangled his life was gone. Yet there was no victory in the room. Only stillness. Only the faint hum of the heater fighting the cold. His phone vibrated with messages, journalists, former colleagues, strangers calling him whistleblower, traitor, savior. He let them pile up unread. Truth had a strange price. It didn't set you free. It simply made escape impossible. Outside, the snowmelt dripped from the rooftops in steady beats. Ethan closed his eyes and breathed. He could still hear his mother's voice from last night, that final whisper of his name. It didn't haunt him. It just lingered, unfinished. By noon, he drove across town to St. Mary's Hospital. Reporters crowded the entrance, cameras waiting for a glimpse of the fallen queen. Security kept them back. Ethan parked far down the street and walked the rest of the way, hood pulled up against the wind. He reached the cardiac wing, stood by the glass doors. Through them, he could see Margaret in the distance, pale, motionless, hooked to machines that blinked in rhythm. A nurse adjusted a monitor. No one else was there. Ethan didn't enter. He just stood and watched, his reflection ghosting over the glass. Son and mother, separated by more than walls. "I'm not here to forgive you," he murmured, voice almost soundless. "I just wanted to make sure you're still breathing. Because if you're alive, maybe there's still a chance to understand what you destroyed." A doctor passed behind him. Ethan stepped away before anyone could notice. As he left the hospital, the cold air bit into his lungs. But it was a clean cold, not the choking kind that came with guilt. He drove north, past the frozen river, past the warehouses, until the skyline faded behind him. When he reached the edge of the Riverside district, a small apartment light glowed against the dusk. Leona opened the door before he could knock. Her face was tired but warm. Noah ran into view, a scarf wrapped twice around his neck. "You're late," the boy said. "I know," Ethan said softly. "But I'm here now." Leona looked at him for a long moment. "Is it over?" Ethan exhaled. "Not yet," he said. "But the noise is gone," she nodded. Behind them, the kettle whistled. For the first time in years, Ethan realized the sound didn't make him flinch. Outside, the last of the snow was melting. The city kept moving, and somewhere in the quiet, a man who had lost everything finally felt what it meant to be free. 3 weeks passed before the headlines grew smaller. The Coal name, once printed in gold across towers and hospitals, now appeared in black and white beneath words like indictment and trial pending. The city moved on, the way cities always do. But the silence left behind carried weight, a strange kind of peace that felt both earned and unfinished. Ethan sat on a park bench overlooking the frozen river. The snow had thinned to slush, the kind that melted under your boots without leaving prints. The world looked softer now, quieter. He held a letter in his hands, not to read, but to remember. The court had scheduled Margaret's arraignment for the following week. Her lawyers claimed exhaustion, mental strain, temporary incapacity. The media called it justice. Ethan didn't know what to call it anymore. He'd learned something in the ruins of her empire. Justice isn't thunder. It's a slow, patient thaw. It doesn't roar. It waits, and it changes the shape of everything it touches. Footsteps crunched behind him. Leona sat down, tucking her coat close. "You've been coming here every morning," she said. "It's quiet here," Ethan replied. She smiled faintly. "You're starting to sound like someone who believes in peace." "I'm trying," he said. Still learning how. They watched the water move beneath the thin crust of ice. A pair of swans glided past the far bank, white on white, almost invisible. Noah's laughter drifted from the playground behind them. For the first time, it didn't make Ethan flinch. It made him breathe. "He's sleeping through the night again," Leona said softly. "That's more than I can say for me," Ethan murmured. She looked at him, eyes gentle. "It'll come." He nodded, and for a while they just sat, the wind brushing against their coats, the sound of melting ice marking time. Later that afternoon, Ethan drove to the hospital. He didn't tell Leona. He just went. The guard at the door recognized him, hesitated, then stepped aside. Margaret's room smelled of disinfectant and fading perfume. The curtains were open. Winter light spilled across the bed. She looked smaller now, her strength hollowed out. Machines hummed beside her, steady and impersonal. When she turned her head, their eyes met. Two people bound by blood and silence. Ethan set an envelope on the table. "It's not a confession," he said quietly. "Just words you never let me say." Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. "You came back. I came to end the story right," he said. "Not with revenge. With truth." Her fingers trembled as she reached for the letter but couldn't hold it. "Was I that cruel?" Ethan didn't answer. He simply said, "You could have been kind." He left before she could speak again. Outside, the afternoon light was brighter, thin, clean, almost forgiving. He walked through it, feeling the cold on his skin and realizing for the first time that it didn't hurt. When he returned home, Noah was asleep on the couch, a book open on his chest. Leona looked up from the kitchen, her hair lit by the last light of day. "Did you find what you were looking for?" she asked. Ethan paused, then nodded. "No more ghosts," she smiled. "Then come inside." He did. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, the city lights shimmered across the river like tiny promises. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang, soft, ordinary, human, and for the first time, Ethan let it ring without fear. Spring came late that year. The snow melted slow, reluctant to let go of winter's grip. The city began to thaw, rivers loosening, streets shining again, people walking without watching the sky. Ethan walked the length of the old bridge each morning. It had become his ritual, the sound of water beneath him, the faint hum of traffic in the distance. Every day looked a little clearer, and for the first time in years, clarity didn't feel like punishment. He stopped halfway across and leaned against the rail, watching the reflection of sunlight ripple across the water. He still carried scars that didn't show, but they no longer dictated the rhythm of his breathing. Margaret Cole died quietly 2 months later. No public statement, no funeral worthy of her name. The papers gave her 2 paragraphs and moved on. Power fades quickly when no one fears it anymore. Ethan didn't attend. But he sent a single flower, white iris, her favorite, with a note that said nothing more than rest. It wasn't forgiveness. It was release. In the years that followed, the Cole Foundation was dismantled, its wealth redistributed to the hospitals and shelters it had once exploited. Her name disappeared from the skyline, replaced by the names of people who had never been allowed to matter before. Ethan found work where no one asked about the past, teaching mechanics at a community workshop near the docks. His hands, once trained to sign deals and wield power, now built engines and fixed things that could still be saved. Sometimes, during lunch breaks, Noah would come by, eyes bright, sleeves rolled up, curious about every machine. "You think I could make something that flies?" He'd ask, Ethan would smile. "You already do every time you dream." Leona ran a small cafe by the waterfront. It smelled of cinnamon and coffee, filled with quiet laughter and the clink of cups. The three of them lived modestly, but peace had its own kind of wealth. At night, after closing, Ethan would help her stack chairs, and they'd sit in the glow of street lamps, saying little. Words weren't needed anymore. The silence between them had become the language of survival. One evening, Noah asked about his grandmother. The question came without malice, just curiosity. She was strong, Ethan said carefully. Too strong for her own heart. She thought love was weakness. I thought the same for a long time. And now? Noah asked. Now I know strength isn't what keeps you standing, Ethan said. It's what lets you reach for someone when you're falling. The boy nodded, as if filing the sentence away for later. Later that week, Ethan found himself back on the bridge at sunset. The water below shimmered gold. He thought about the generations of pain that had ended with one choice, not to destroy, but to stop repeating. He understood now. Legacy wasn't blood or empire or name. It was the echo you left in someone else's courage. He looked toward the skyline, where cranes lifted steel and light into new forms. The city would build again. It always did. Behind him, footsteps approached, Leona and Noah walking side by side. The boy waved. You coming home? Ethan turned, smiled. Right behind you. They crossed the bridge together, shadows stretching long behind them. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of spring across the river. For a brief moment, Ethan thought he heard the faint chime of a bell, the same tone that had once marked fear, now sounding like freedom. He looked up, eyes steady, voice low, not to anyone, but to the air itself. What do we build, he whispered, when the past finally lets go? The question lingered in the evening light, unanswered but alive.